Hey guys, Mr. Lewis here. Just wanted to say welcome back. Hope everybody had a great spring break. Wanted to take a few minutes just to go over the things that we've been talking about or things that you've been learning about before spring break. Just a real quick video. We've been talking about Earth history, of course, and right before spring break you will learn about the geologic time scale. So, what is the geologic time scale? Well, the geologic time scale is a timeline that organizes all the major events in Earth's history from the time the Earth was formed up until present time today. How is the geologic time scale divided? Well, it's broken up into four main divisions, starting with eons, and then those are broken up into eras, and those are broken up into periods, and those get broken up into epochs or epochs, however you say it. I'm not sure. Okay, so if I could get Hayden to zoom in here just a second. This is the notes that I usually give on the geologic time scale. I will be putting one of these in the assignment for the week. Nothing that you really do on it. It'll have all the answers filled in. It's just something to help you study, give you an example of what the geologic time scale looks like. So I want to start with looking at Earth's timeline is broken down into 4 eons, right? And if you notice, 3 of those eons, the Hadean, the Archean, and the Proterozoic eon, are all contained in a period of time that we call the Precambrian. All right? So now, Precambrian time, like I said, covers 3 of Earth's 4 eons. So if Earth is around 4.6 billion years old, Precambrian time started at the beginning of the Earth when it was formed and lasted just about 4 billion years. So Precambrian time covers a significant portion of Earth's history, right? And you notice it's just a small little section on the geologic time scale, and we'll get more into that as the week goes on as to why that takes up such a small amount of the geologic time scale, considering it's most of the Earth's history. Anyway, so Earth's history is broken down into 4 eons. 3 of the 4 eons are in Precambrian time. Okay, Precambrian time had some life in it. It was very simple life, mostly things like simple algae and bacteria. And then towards the end of Precambrian time, things started to get a little more complex and a little more diverse. And we saw something happen which marked the end of Precambrian time, which is called the Cambrian explosion. And the Cambrian explosion is quite simply a blossoming of life, a huge explosion of life that occurred all over the planet. Now, most of the planet, of course, is covered by ocean water. Most of the life would still be in the oceans at this time, but life became much more diverse and much more widespread during the Cambrian explosion. And the Cambrian explosion marks the end of Precambrian time, marks the end of the Proterozoic eon, and starts what we know as the Paleozoic era. Now, the Paleozoic era is the first era in the Phanerozoic eon. The Phanerozoic eon is actually the same eon that we're living in today. We haven't had anything happen which would end the Phanerozoic eon. So we're in the Paleozoic era. Okay, and the Paleozoic era saw life change a lot, get more complex. You had a lot of creatures start to show up with hard parts, things like exoskeletons and shells, trilobites and brachiopods, things that we would later find fossils of because of the presence of those hard parts. And then later on in the Phanerozoic era, we saw vertebrate fish, which anything that's a vertebrate has a backbone. So these vertebrate fish started to show up in the Phanerozoic eon, and then later on, we saw these vertebrate fish change and evolve into amphibians, and they began to leave the water and develop the ability to live outside of water. And they still had to stay close. They couldn't completely get away from water. They hadn't developed yet to the point that their skin would keep from drying out, and they couldn't lay their eggs outside of a moist or wet environment. So during this first era, we've been talking about the Paleozoic era, right? And so the Paleozoic era, and eras are the second largest division of geologic time. They're what eons are broken down into. Okay, so we have talked about how during this era we saw life get more diverse, more complex. We had creatures appearing with exoskeletons and shells, and then later on we had vertebrate fish, which would have backbones and skeletons, and then those later would evolve into amphibians. Okay, and thing to remember about eras is all eras end with a mass extinction. Okay, now before the mass extinction occurs that kills off most of the creatures living in the Phanerozoic era, or the Paleozoic era, we saw a new creature start to emerge, and this was called a reptile. And the difference in a reptile and an amphibian is reptiles, they evolved or developed a hard, scaly skin which would better protect them and keep them from drying out. Basically, it helped them retain their bodily fluids, and it didn't let them dry out so they could get further away from water. Still have to have water. All living things on the planet still to this day have to have water. But they could get further away from water, and they could survive longer in drier climates. So that enabled them life to start to move further away from water, right? And the reptiles also developed the ability to lay eggs with a hard outer shell, which would also keep their eggs from drying out. So that let them, so as amphibians up to this point had to lay their eggs either in the water or close to the water. So reptiles being able to lay eggs with a hard outer shell let them get further away from the water. So then we have a mass extinction, which ends the Paleozoic era, right? And that mass extinction wipes out almost all the life on the planet. A huge percentage of the marine life and the amphibians were wiped out, which kind of opened the door for the reptiles to take over and become the dominant creatures of this next era, which is the Mesozoic era. Okay, so the Mesozoic era, and you can see it's broken down into periods, right? Periods are the next division of geologic time. They're what eras are divided into. And periods have specific fossils that are associated to them. And you can tell by the names of the periods during the Mesozoic era, Triassic and Jurassic, things that are going to be happening here, the things that are going to be ruling the earth during this time are reptiles, and specifically the dinosaurs. Right? So the dinosaurs were on the planet for millions of years. They were very diverse creatures. We have a lot of different kinds of dinosaurs, and they didn't all just die off. They started out and they evolved, and then they kept evolving and changing until the mass extinction in the Cretaceous era at the end of the Cretaceous period that did wipe out all the dinosaurs. So, during the Mesozoic era, which is the last era we were talking about before spring break, we had the emergence of reptiles, specifically dinosaurs, which dominated the planet. But during this Mesozoic era, we also saw a couple of other things start to appear. We saw the emergence of birds, which a lot of scientists believe birds evolved from small meat-eating dinosaurs. And then if you ever looked at a chicken really close, you would believe that. They can be really vicious creatures. And then also during the Mesozoic era, we saw the emergence of small mouse-like creatures. Their bodies were covered with fur. They had tails. They were warm-blooded, which means that their body temperature wasn't controlled by their surroundings. Cold-blooded creatures, of course, they have to get in the sunlight to warm up, and if their surrounding is cold, then they get cold. Warm-blooded creatures, they can maintain their body temperature, and the fur, of course, helps that. Mammals also had the ability to produce milk, which allowed them to feed their young. Those two traits specifically, the ability for the mothers to produce milk and the fact that they had fur-covered bodies, which allowed them to maintain their body temperature, allowed mammals to survive the mass extinction that ended the Mesozoic era during the Cretaceous period. Now, and then there was another one that a lot of people don't think about, but another organism that started to appear towards the end of the Mesozoic era was flowering plants. Okay, up until this point, we didn't have a lot of flowering plants. Right? So this was a really big deal because after the Mesozoic era, flowering plants had seeds with hard shells, and these hard-shelled seeds allowed flowering plants to also survive this mass extinction. And then now, even into today's time, the majority of the plants on the planet are flowering plants. Okay, so now we're getting ready to move into the Cenozoic era, right? Because at the end of the Mesozoic era, we have this mass extinction, and this mass extinction occurred about 65 million years ago, which marks the end of the Cretaceous period, the end of the Mesozoic era, and it wipes out the dinosaurs. Okay, so 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs went extinct. Whatever it was that caused that, a lot of scientists believe it was an asteroid or a comet that struck the Earth, threw a huge dust cloud into the atmosphere, blocked out the sun, caused some major volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, and all that combined together led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. Okay, so we're getting ready. Your next lesson is going to be learning about the Cenozoic era, which is actually still the era that we live in today. All right, no mass extinctions happened yet to end the Cenozoic era. So good luck, enjoy the rest of the week, and I'll see you in a few days. Thank you.